What's up, everyone? Happy Sunday evening, and welcome to your Bret the Hitman Hart Appreciation Night here on the Good Mic Work Commentaries YouTube channel. Tonight, A&E wrapped up their WWE Legends series, their biography series on the various wrestling legends. I believe we had a grand total of 8, if I'm not mistaken. Stone Cold Steve Austin, Roddy Piper, Macho Man Randy Savage, Booker T, Shawn Michaels, The Ultimate Warrior, Mick Foley, and of course tonight's episode of Bret the Hitman Hart, which was fantastic and a really good watch here. If you guys are watching this after the fact, please let me know in the comments below what you thought about this one. I thought it was an appropriate finale, especially for me, because you guys know what a pivotal role Bret played in my just becoming a wrestling fan in general, or at least sticking with it. I was a fan way before Bret, but don't know if I would have hung out during my high school years had it not been for him, based on where the current WWE product and everything was at the time. And Bret's just very, very important to me, in my life and stuff, just in terms of, my wrestling, becoming a wrestling fan and maintaining being a wrestling fan. And every reason why I liked wrestling as a kid was all kind of due to him and, shaped a lot of me in a lot of ways. So, I don't have a lot of favorite wrestlers, but I've always said throughout the years here on the channel that Bret was my favorite. And I thought it was definitely appropriate if I'm going to come up here and fully review any of these. This is the one we're going to do. Now, we've spoken on the other episodes, which were all really good. The only one that gave us some funny vibes was Macho Man Randy Savage. Came off a bit odd or a bit different than some of the other ones, but overall, the series is really good. I mean, I honestly liked them all, even the Shawn one, even the ones that we knew so much about already, like Austin, like Shawn, and like this one here with Bret. It was also well put together, and it made you happy, at the end to see where these guys were in their lives and things like that. And I think the dark horse, the Cinderella here of the whole series was Booker T. So far, I still think that might be the one that I like the most. Mick Foley's last week was really good, too. That's up there. And, of course, this Bret Hart one. But, I'm a Bret Hart historian. So as crazy as this is going to sound, I'm not sure if I enjoyed Bret's biography the most of all of them. I think I enjoyed the end the most, seeing him with his kids, being a grandpa, thinking about how, I remember him so well, in the prime of his life, and just seeing him like that is just a very heartwarming and joyous thing for me to see. So I think that really made the biography for me. But because I'm so, such a big Bret Hart fan, they weren't going to tell me a whole lot here that I wasn't kind of aware of. So I think it's because it wasn't giving me a whole lot of new information. That's why maybe I don't, this one isn't, going to be matched up there with some of the others, because there was a lot of Booker T's story that I didn't know about, even a little bit about Mick Foley's. So here with Bret, it's kind of a different deal, but it's always good to look at his career, and I love it when they talked about his family and his upbringing and how he got into the business and wrestling and WWE, becoming a champion, the screw job and Owen and WCW and the whole ride that he's been on. For him to be where he is in his life is a very happy thing for me to see, at least for a Bret Hart fan. So we're going to kind of get into all of it here tonight. Should be a fun, casual hangout here, just talking about Bret Hart. We'll relive some of our favorite memories. For those of you who are old enough to remember some of this stuff, we'll go through the biography here, what they discussed, what they talked about, who was interviewed, that sort of thing. And I'll give my opinions and my memories as we go through here on some of these situations that Bret Hart and matches that Bret Hart found himself in, and all the drama and all the happiness and all the sadness. It was quite a career indeed. Good to see you. We Are Pro Wrestling. Go check out his channel. Good people over there. I know you're knowledgeable on Bret Hart's career as well, so I'm sure you appreciated this biography. Yeah, really good A&E biography you just said there. By the way, if anybody wants to keep us updated, I don't know what the hell's going on, but that Logan Paul Floyd Mayweather fight, I think, is going on maybe like right now. So if you guys want to update us in the chat, feel free to do that. Don't really care who wins that, but I know a lot of people are watching it, and I can't, even if this shit is staged, isn't Floyd Mayweather undefeated? He's going to go out there and do the job. I don't care how much money he's got more money than he's ever going to need. What's in it for him to do the job? I don't even get it. So anyway, let us know who wins that if anybody's watching that fucking nonsense. George Morris, I'm glad you're here, because you and Bret Hart have something in common. And thanks for the $5 as always. Hey, Greg, how's it going? Bret Hart biography, 10 out of 10. Look at that. A Monday Night Raw I hope you can review is October 19th, 1998, after Judgment Day. I was actually sitting ringside 2 nights before that at a Saturday house show, I think. I might have even been at that Raw. I was either at the Raw, I might have been at that show. I got to look at my calendar. I was definitely at a house show that weekend. Oh, wait, and then the taped version was when, no, I'm sorry, it was the following weekend. It was 6 days after of Judgment Day. So, yeah, I was at the house show after that. But that episode where Austin got re-signed and he did the gun thing to Vince's head, that was a taped show. They taped that on Tuesday, aired it the next week. So we kind of knew the results on that. But that would be a good one to do. That was a crazy time when he actually fired Austin. But anyway, you said tonight's biography was a 10 out of 10. You usually say shit is a 0 out of 10, which is exactly how Bret Hart described Goldberg tonight, which was pretty funny. We got through the whole biography almost without Bret burying anybody, and we got to the very end where they talk about WCW, and he called him a 0 out of 10. I popped. I'm like, there's our Bret. There's our Bret. You know, I can't hate him for that. It was pretty fucking funny. So we'll get into all of that, but I thought of you immediately when he said 0 out of 10. He goes, if you're grading a wrestler from 1 to 10, he's a 0 out of 10. Just some shit like that. Hilarious. We Are Pro Wrestling. My first house show I ever attended was in September 97. Main event was Bret and Undertaker. Yeah, was that before or after September 22nd? Was that after the Vince conversation or before it? Because that was at the Raw at MSG that month. It's an interesting month to attend a show, that's for sure. And I was talking about this on Twitter. I mean, this is skipping way ahead. We'll get to it later. But when they were talking about Bret leaving and going to WCW and how Vince, said, hey, I can't afford your contract and I want out of it. We want to send you to WCW. We've all known that story, and it's all been, really head-scratching. But one thing I didn't really think about was how odd the timing really actually was when you think about it. It felt like a very rash, rushed, desperate decision almost. And even though WWE was in hard financial times, I don't think it was to the degree that keeping Bret on would have put the company out of business. Basically meaning they could have held out or maybe just waited a tiny bit of time until you had this conversation with Bret, maybe even try to get into next year's WrestleMania and have him job and lose on his way out and then send him back into WCW. They could have they could have been able to afford that or managed that financially. It wasn't to the point where, if Bret stays on for one more month, we're going to go out of business. I don't think it was like that. And when you think about the timing of it, this is September. The Canada-USA feud is still going on. It's still rather hot. It's not as hot as it was in July, but it's still there. And it's doing well. And Bret is your champ. Shawn Michaels has just come back from losing his smile, and then he left again after the hair-pulling fight with Bret. And everybody thought he was going to go to WCW. Now he comes back. He's back in the fold, but he's been sketchy as fuck all the way up until this point. So you can't really trust or rely on Shawn. And Austin just took the pile driver from Owen weeks before this at SummerSlam. You don't even know if Austin's going to be okay yet. So it's not like you already knew, we can, strap the company to this guy's back. He had a busted up neck. So it was very odd timing to want to let your champion go. So they should have waited until shit got more stable with Shawn and Steve, or until you took the belt off of Bret. Why did it have to be right then? 2 weeks later, Brian Pillman would die. Kind of dark, murky period. As hot as 97 was, it got ugly at the end of it. Before things brightened up in 98 with Austin and Tyson and all that shit. So, I think, I don't know what their future plans were, but they felt like they had to get out of that contract now. But looking back, it was kind of weird timing. I can believe that Vince didn't want to pay Bret that, but I'm just surprised that it was such a rash decision that he decided to have that conversation with him when he's champ. He's got all this heat with Shawn. You're just asking for a problem. And Vince is smart businessman. How did he not see these potential issues here, especially when Bret worked into his contract that he had creative control? Just very strange timing when you look back at all that. But we're ways off from getting to 97, and that whole debacle will get there. We'll kind of talk about everything, the early stuff first. See if anybody else has anything to say in the chat, and then we'll get going here. Good to see you in here as well. JJ Legg, Mike Witt, Zane G. What's up, David? We got Charlie in the house, Kyle Cammons, Maka International, Sonic, Cerebrus, Jet the Hawk, Sam, Ben, Big J, Robert Shelton. Right on. Oh, Maka, you had that original first comment up there where you are impersonating the Fink. I hate to be this guy. I got to correct you. The long drawn-out call was on the Hitman part, not on the Hart part. The Hart part was quick. He would go, Bret, Hitman, Hart, like that. So you got to switch those spellings around, and you almost got the Fink nailed, buddy. Anyway, I'm a Bret Hart snob. What can I say? Anyway, I also want to do a special shout out and thank you to Meryl Hamilton. Check out her YouTube channel and her social media stuff. It's right in the description below. I found her cover of Bret Hart's theme song and thought it would be a good, kind of opening song here while I'm getting my countdown screen ready and getting ready to go live. And I sent her a message on social media asking her if I could use it. She was gracious enough to allow me to, and I told her I would plug everything she's got. Really cool cover songs on her channel, The Ultimate Warrior, and a lot of other stuff. So check it out. Link is in the description there, along with her Twitter and along with her Facebook. Shoot her a follow and give her a like over there on the Facebook. And thank you again, Meryl, for the use of that song. I really, really appreciate it. Apparently, her boyfriend's got a podcast as well, which I'm sure links are on her socials. And if I would have remembered, I would have put that in there too. But anyway, Meryl, thank you again for that, and I appreciate it. Anyway, why don't we start getting into the stuff here, just into the thick of it, and talk about the biography itself. I want to read that AWA comment from Mike, though, first. First ever house show I was at was an AWA show. That's awesome. In Central Wisconsin. Main event was Midnight Rockers versus Doug Summers and Buddy Rose in a cage. Another bloodbath, huh? Yeah, that might be a lesser known, lesser famous bloodbath, but that's pretty damn cool to see a match like that live. Wow, that's awesome. I can smell the arena. Midwest, man. There's a certain vibe to it. That's pretty cool, man. I've never been to an AWA show. I wish I could have been. Anywho, let's talk about Bret Hart's A&E biography. Like I said, this is the finale in the 8-part series, and they had some really good ones here. I mean, all of them were really well done. It opened up with the Stone Cold Steve Austin one, and then we had Piper. And like I said, the only one that gave us a little bit of a funny feeling was the Savage one. That one kind of felt a little bit different, had a different tone than these others did. But overall, they were really well done and told stories that I felt like omitted very little, because these were 2-hour-long biographies, not just one. So they really were able to touch on everything here. Even in the Bret one here tonight, I felt like they rushed over a couple things, but they basically mentioned everything, even if they spent a short amount of time on it. So I think you could have gone 3 hours on each and every one of these stars that they did. And this isn't their first trip doing this. Way back in the day, I have all of these on tape because I taped them off of TV when they happened. And I want to say it was 99 or 2000. And A&E did a bunch of bios on WWE stars. Owen Hart even had one done that Martha was a part of. She was interviewed for that, and a big part of it. And then they did one on Foley. I think they might have done one on Austin, and I think they even did some WCW ones as well, Hogan and stuff. And they were pretty well done for the time. I want to say that was like 99, something like that. So those were pretty good. But this is, here 22 years later, to see everybody where they are in these stages of their career instead of in their prime of their career like it was back in the day, I thought really told the story much better. So A&E has always done a pretty good job of, working with wrestling and doing wrestling stuff, and these biographies were no different. These were all really, really good. So anyway, it opened up with Bret Hart painting, or drawing, I should say. He's an incredible artist. It's amazing how many wrestlers can draw. I know it's Bret and I know it's Lawler of the two big ones, but I know there's other wrestlers that are really good artists somehow. It seems to be a theme with them. And Bret would share some pretty cool cartoons later on in the biography as well. So it kind of opened up with him painting. And it's just, I hate to, elaborate on this even more, but to me, it's just so surreal kind of seeing Bret like that. Because of how many memories I have and are like flooded, from me being a kid and me being younger and in high school and following his career and being such a mark for him, like when I was in my 20s. And just really at the end of the day, just kind of wanting the best for him, just, hoping that he's happy and he's healthy and he lives long, and it was getting dark there for a while when people were dying. Owen, Davey, the stroke, his parents, so much dark shit was happening to Bret. I wasn't sure if he was going to be able to get out of it. To see him, with gray hair, still, somewhat bitter and burying people, and he's got a good sense of humor, and he's just a trip, man. So just to see Bret, just to see my, the only idol I've really ever had. I've never marked out for any celebrity or even any rock band. Nobody's really ever inspired me to do anything. I've never really had anybody that I was just, crazy about. Bret is really the closest thing to it. So I think that's why I cling to it so much, because I can't think of anything I had a connection with as a kid. Sure, I went through phases and had things that I liked, but nobody was like a lifelong thing for me. Nothing was. Maybe the Karate Kid franchise and wrestling itself. But other than that, Bret's it. So to see him kind of in this setting, kind of an old man, he's 63 years old, and, and underneath all of that, he physically looks so much different than he did, but you can still see it's the same Bret. It just brings joy to my heart. You can't explain this to anybody that didn't follow Bret's career, and, maybe you weren't even born when he retired, so looking back, it's just different to try to explain how they always say that Bret Hart has a special connection with the fans. Somehow it really is true. It's really odd to try to describe it, but it's true. There's a different, Bret Hart fans are different, it's all I can really say about it. And it's hard to describe, but it's definitely there. So it's just kind of cool to see Bret Hart like that. Lots of people interviewed or included in the interview for this, as well as they were for many of these. A lot of these interviews were, to talk about everybody involved here. But we had Bret himself. Natalia was on here. So was Julie Hart. Good to see Bret and her have maintained a good relationship because they do have a lot of kids together. His kids were on this as well. Jade and Allison were interviewed for the documentary. You didn't see Dallas and Blade until the end. Jimmy Hart was on here. Undertaker, Sheamus, Vince McMahon, Drew McIntyre, Edge, Sam Roberts, Jim Ross, Shawn Michaels, lots of guys. And it was really well done. Of course, they're going to have to open up with his upbringing. Everybody knows the story. He's one of 12 kids. There was 8 boys and 4 girls. All 8 boys became wrestlers and all 4 girls married wrestlers. That has got to be an absolute fucking nightmare for Helen. A lot of these stories about his upbringing I knew, and they talked about. I've always been fascinated with Stu's upbringing because it was gnarly. This guy had nothing. He was living in Canada, for fuck's sake, in the winter, poorest of the poor, dirt poor, bare essentials only to survive, no food, to the point where he's hunting rabbits and squirrels with a slingshot, boiling them and eating them for dinner. That's crazy, son. So that is just you are tough if you grow up that way. And this fucker sprouts 12 kids, and all of them, were tough just like he was. They got that heart. And that's just an incredible story of just survival by Stu, and then finding shelter in the YMCA simply to get warm, and then stumbling and falling ass backwards into amateur wrestling and learning shoot wrestling and how to make guys submit. And it just became religion to him, and he started to work out and get bigger and get better and stronger and tougher. And, that's when he was kind of discovered, and, Tootsmont took him in, and they, molded him into being quite the professional wrestler and promoter, in Stampede Wrestling. I think they said they bought it for $50,000 or whatever. So I never knew. There's a couple of statistics in here like that one that I never knew how he acquired Calgary or Stampede Wrestling. So, to hear that he bought it for $50,000 is like pretty crazy. But back in those days, 50 G's was a ton of money. I mean, it's a lot of money now, but to buy a whole territory for it's pretty awesome. So that coming to be is kind of cool to kind of hear them retell that. Bret would tell the story. He's always told the bear story. He told it in the Hall of Fame. He's told it in multiple DVD documentaries and things like that about how they had the wrestling bear under the porch in a cage, and they would put the ice cream on their toes and dangle the toes, and the bear would lick it off. And we've heard the story like 15 times, but in this documentary, Bret cracked me up. He said, as a kid, I didn't think anything of it. I just thought everybody had a bear under their porch. That popped me because you do have to think about it from a kid's perspective. He's living in this crazy world, this 22-room mansion. He's got 11 siblings. He's got parents that run a crazy fucking circus out of the house. They got bears under the porch. It's just a fucking but to him, that's all he knows. To him, every family is like this. It's extremely unconventional. And to grow up that way had to have been a trip. It had to be a combination of both awesome and also a nightmare at the same time. I don't even know if I could function with that many kids and brothers picking on me and fucking with me all the time. Like, I don't think I could handle it. Like, I'd probably go fucking crazy. So it's, when you think about a kid like that, I'm like, yeah, what else does he know? As far as he knows, everybody's parents are wrestling promoters and have wild animals in the garage or something. So pretty funny line there from Bret Hart. It was really cool, too, to see him in front of the Hart House. That's a bucket list thing for me. But I have no reason to ever go to Calgary. There's nothing else I would really care to see there. I don't like the cold. I'd probably go in the summer, obviously, but and I know Canada, parts of it are beautiful, but I don't know why I would really make a special trip up to Calgary. But I really want to see the Hart House. I don't know. I don't think it's tourable, or I think it's owned or whatever. So I understand going in is probably not an option. They didn't go in here. But I'd like to at least see it with my own eyes, take a picture of it, and just kind of smell it. You know what I mean? Like, it's just so significant, to me as a wrestling fan. That's my favorite wrestling family, too, above the Von Erichs and the Guerreros and everybody else. It's the Harts. So that's a bucket list thing. I want to see it. So it was kind of eerie and also cool to see Bret Hart standing in front of the house in present day. And then later on, they would cut to old 8mm footage of him playing like flag football as a teenager in the yard. Like, that's crazy with the house right there. Just insane that they all packed into that house and they all lived there like that. So crazy. So we would get a little bit of that home video footage of him playing football, a lot of pics of him being young, and he would talk about his love for music and that wrestling was the last thing he wanted to get into, and he wanted to go into film and the film industry, which we knew. He's told that story many times before as well. I wasn't aware that he actually enrolled in film school and left. I don't know if I was aware that he actually went into film school and got that far, but he did. He even got to the point where I think they made a little movie about a lizard. They bought a lizard and, tried to make a movie of this lizard being this giant beast, tearing up cars and shit with model cars. And he said the lizard died, and it's probably because they just didn't know how to take care of it, and they had it out there, trying to have it attack toy cars and shit. Probably just weren't taking care of it well, and it died. So then he wound up quitting the film school and then deciding, because he didn't really know what the hell to do, to get into wrestling. And that's when he started training with his dad and getting into Stampede, and the rest of the story, which they will get into here. And I've got a lot of Bret Hart matches and footage from Stampede Wrestling from when he was first getting in, and it's fascinating stuff to see how young he was then. And even when he's brand new and some of the things he was doing in the ring, he would still do all the way up until the end of his career. One of my favorites was when he would pin a guy. Bret had a different way. Bret would never hook the leg, because he would always, his matches, he'd never pin his opponent to win, usually in a singles match, unless it was a small package. If he hits you with that top or that second rope elbow, he knows he's not going to get the 3 count on you, but he pins you anyway. But it's the way he does it. He puts both hands on the arm of the guy on the other side, and he's always done that ever since he was a kid, and that's just kind of crazy. Like his mannerisms, some of his movements, they got a lot better and they evolved, but they're still there right from the very beginning, and when you really watch him work as a kid, I'm like, oh, wow, very little has changed. His technique has gotten better, but man, that's Bret. You can tell, it was there early, and he took to it right away. So very cool to kind of see, him progressing through Stampede Wrestling, and they spent a fair amount of time on there. Funny story too about when he was a kid, and Archie, the Stomper, had cut a promo saying he was going to kill all the Harts and pile drive Helen in the driveway or something like that. And then he showed up at the house, pulled up in a car, and Helen ran out the front door to go give him a hug and give him his paycheck and send him on his way. And that's when I think they kind of realized that, oh, okay, well, this guy's not going to come here and kill us. But that was probably a pretty freaky thing to see for a kid, when this guy's on TV saying he's going to kill all you. Then he shows up at your house. Holy shit. I'd be shitting my little 8-year-old pants too. So Bret, becomes a wrestler. He's in Stampede now, and then we get into Stu selling to WWE, and we know the story there too. Sold the TV time and basically made a deal with Vince that you got to give these guys jobs, meaning Bret and Davey Boy Smith and Dynamite Kid and Jim Neidhart. You have to bring them all in, which Vince agreed. But at first, he wasn't paired with Neidhart right away. They wanted to make him Cowboy Bret Hart and give him a horse, and Bret was like, fuck, no, are you crazy? They showed a lot of cool footage here of some of his early on matches. Some of them I haven't seen. I have seen some of Bret's matches before they teamed him with Neidhart in WWE, but probably only like 4. There's a couple clips here of matches I'd never seen before, so it was really cool, and a couple of them he won. So they showed Bret kind of like first couple months there trying to find his way a little bit. They pitched the Cowboy deal. He doesn't want it, and apparently it was his idea, according to Jimmy Hart and Bret, that he was the one that suggested teaming up with Jim Neidhart, forming a tag team. And even then, in the biography here, he said he didn't think they were really going to last. They didn't even have matching outfits until they booked them for a Saturday Night's Main Event match. And it's like, okay, we better get some pink, or we better get some outfits. And it turned out to be pink. And then, that fit them perfectly. So a lot of these things, like is the case with so many people in wrestling, when you listen to their story, it's dumb luck most of the time. Bret was like, they were on the phone with some outfit maker, and he's like, all I got is pink. And Anvil's like, go with it. And just you never know. It just fucking happened. It worked. They could have gone with green, and it would have sucked. What if she only had green that day? What if? Not that they couldn't have gone to pink at some point, or somebody would have suggested it, but it seemed like it was just on a whim. Like it just happened to be pink. And like shit like that is crazy, when you find something and it works, and without it, you might not even be the same type of shit. I'm like, well, I'm glad we called her that day. So they got into his run with the Hart Foundation, winning the tag team titles and all the success they had there. And then he talked about Vince splitting them into singles. Now, Bret says that Vince told him that he has more fan mail than anybody else in the company. A lot of girls like Bret. And Bret was an attractive guy. Like back then, even when he was in the Hart Foundation, he was one of my favorite wrestlers. I've told the story a million times, way before he even broke up with Jim. I liked him. I don't know why. I couldn't put my finger on it. I just did. And then when they split them into singles, it didn't work at first. They put them back together and they would win the tag team titles again, and they would break them up a second time. So I don't know which time Vince was talking about the fan mail deal, but it was the second time that things really got big for Bret, because now they were going to push him for real instead of making him, kind of not an enhancement talent, but he was losing to the, a lot of guys, namely Mr. Perfect. He was really used to help get Perfect over. And now it was payback time, because now they're going to put the Intercontinental title on him. They show the match at SummerSlam, which honestly is probably, I don't know if it's my favorite Bret Hart match now, but for a long time it was. Winning the Intercontinental title was in the Garden. It was such a big deal. And Stu and Helen were there, and that whole moment was just kind of awesome, especially with Perfect being the guy that he beat. So they showed all of that, which was cool. Then they skip to the next year where they talk about the match with Davey Boy Smith and Diana and the whole family dynamic there, where Helen was crying on the TV. I remember that. That was funny. And Bulldog wanted a shot at the title, and now all of a sudden they're referencing the fact that these guys are brother-in-laws. But I always thought it was weird that at this time they didn't talk about the tag team title feud. It's like they didn't want to remind people that Bret was a shitty heel and he fucked over Davey bad when he beat him for the tag team titles when they injured Dynamite and had the evil referee, Danny Davis. They didn't bring up any of this stuff. They were brother-in-laws back then too. So why didn't they bring it up? I just thought it was funny. Oh, your brother-in-law, you have to get in the ring with him. I'm like, yeah, they already did this a few years ago. So I always thought it was funny that they never mentioned the tag stuff. If they did, I never heard it at the time during the build of this, and I remember it pretty well. But I can't believe they didn't at least touch on, because at that time it was pretty cool. Holy shit, these guys exchanged the tag titles once. Now they're going to fight for the Intercontinental title. They would later go on to face each other for the world title as well, and at that time, that was pretty cool, and I thought it was weird they didn't mention it. But showing Diana torn in the middle and the whole Wembley match and 80,000 people there, it was pretty cool. It was pretty awesome, and it's one of Bret's best matches, even though he lost. So they got into that whole situation, and then right after that, shortly after that, was when they decided to have him beat Ric Flair for the title in Saskatoon. Showed a lot of footage from that, him winning the belt for the first time, which was awesome. Drew McIntyre pays tribute to Bret Hart in here and says that he patterned his suplex after Bret, and I didn't even notice that. And they did show a side-by-side, and Drew does it pretty well. Bret throwing a vertical suplex is one of my favorite things he ever did, because it was just so smooth and just fluent, and he had just a certain way about doing it that nobody else did. And I think that's awesome. Drew earned some cool points with me for that. I didn't even realize that he throws a suplex. It's kind of putting the one leg up in the air like that, the way Bret does, and very few people did it. Nobody did it as good as him, but very few people did it that way in general. So Drew tributing to him there was pretty cool. They go to a spot where Bret, I think, is like at his kitchen table. They're reviewing a lot of cartoons and shit that he's drawn over the years. Lots of cool stuff, because he's told these stories. I read his whole book twice, and I remember some of the stories he would tell in there about a lot of the drawings he would do for the wrestlers, and a lot of times he would just draw the wrestlers and just different little caricatures of them, and how much Andre was a fan. It was kind of cool of him to show all of those that he saved throughout the years. Just very cool stuff there. So it was a fun little break before they would get into the feud with Owen Hart, because now Bret's champ. He's been champ a couple of times. He wins the title at WrestleMania 10, or they would talk about here in the feud with Owen. When they decided, they talked about Owen's history, how they didn't have anything for him. He was going to quit, go be a fireman. That's when Bret suggested that they work a program together. He turns on him, kicks his leg out of his leg at the Royal Rumble in '94, and then they head into the WrestleMania match. And everybody put this match over for being one of the best, or the best opener in WrestleMania history. I believe it is. It's on my top 3 WrestleMania matches of all time. I really love this match, always have. Just thought it was such a perfect setting, opening match, WrestleMania 10 in '94. You didn't have any shows that really felt like big shows, and this one felt like a big show because it was the 10th anniversary of WrestleMania. What are we on now, 37? Back then, I remember saying, wow, I can't believe there's been 10 WrestleManias. That's a lot. Go back in time, tell me what I'm about to witness here. I'm going to be on fucking video camera talking about WrestleMania 38. Jesus. But at that time, 10 was a lot. Felt like WrestleMania had been around forever, as far as I was concerned, at the age I was. So it was a big deal, and so that match was just super important to me. So they put it over here, which was nice. Showed Bret beating Yoko at the end and Owens staring at him and then getting into their feud, their SummerSlam match, and all that stuff was cool to kind of relive here, but they didn't spend a ton of time on it, but they did mention it. Bret, of course, then would drop the belt to Shawn, and he'd take some time off, and that's when they started talking about the contract negotiations with WCW, the Lonesome Dove stuff, and everything he did during his time off from WWE. Let me say what's up to a couple new people in the chat before we continue. Thank you, Chris Ludecki. Appreciate the $5 from you. Even though Bret was always really serious as a character in person, he'd always laugh when Owen would scream ass into the mic when cutting a promo. I have to try to watch that again. Owen's easy to laugh at. Ass. He probably screamed ass a lot during that Austin feud when it was the Kiss My Ass match prior to the SummerSlam shit. Bret Hart or Hulk Hogan, what? Bret Hart's better. Nobody's better than Bret tonight. You can put anybody you want over Bret any other night, but tonight we're going to go Bret's the best, or you're blocked. I'm kidding. 97 Bret Hart heel was your favorite heel of all time. I loved that time. Like I said, we'll get to it later, but 97's a strange year because it was like, it started out kind of good, big Royal Rumble, then it got weird quickly with Shawn losing his smile, but then they bounced back with a pretty good WrestleMania 13 in that Austin-Bret match, then Bret turning heel full-blown, attacking Shawn, Canada, USA, Austin, Canadian Stampede in your house, Bret winning the title at SummerSlam with Shawn botching the deal as the referee. I mean, it was like bubbly. It was getting bigger and bigger, and then boom, then it ended. Then the next thing you know, Vince wants out of the contract. Brian Pillman dies. Screw job. It's like boom, boom, boom. And they just got buried. And then they would bounce back again with Tyson coming in January. But weird time, man. Just really weird time. We'll get to it. We're almost there, actually. But after the Jose Lopez, good to see as well. And Mr. E, I think I said hi to you. And Trey Williams, did I get you? Is Vince going to sell WWE? I don't know. That might be a topic for tomorrow's podcast. We'll be up here tomorrow night, by the way, reviewing Monday Night Raw, but it's going to be a good Monday Night Raw. September 27th, 2000. We're going to take a look back at that show after we spend 15 minutes on whatever bullshit they give us tomorrow night on Raw. So we'll do that, talk about the Lashley contract signing with Drew McIntyre, and whatever Randy Orton and Riddle does, we'll talk about that. Then we're going to move on and talk about some good Monday Night Raw stuff. And then in following weeks, we're going to do This Week in Raw History segments where we're going to talk about all the cool Raws that happened from that time period between now and when wrestling fans come back in July to give us something fun to do on Mondays, because Raw is ass. But we're not here to talk about Raw. We're here to talk about the Hitman. Like I said, he's now dropped the title to Shawn. He's going to take some time off. His contract is up, and it allows him to negotiate with WCW. Now, this is really interesting because, you know, it's significant to how the chain of events that would unfold was really set into motion here with these very negotiations. Bret talked about how much fun he had on the set of Lonesome Dove. I never saw Lonesome Dove. It's like a cowboy movie or cowboy TV series or some shit like that. But he said he absolutely loved doing it. And I remember they would print a lot of photo shoots from that, or a lot of stuff in the WWF magazine from Bret when he was doing that and interviewing him there on set and everything. And I remember seeing that, and I'm like, oh, God, I hope we don't lose Bret to the movies or lose Bret to Hollywood. I wanted him so desperately to come back, but he took a meeting with Eric Bischoff, and he said it a couple of times. He even told the story here in the biography that when they asked him what he wanted, because he had no intention of really jumping, he said, I want whatever Hulk Hogan is making plus 1 penny. In the past, he's also said $1. I think he kind of gets his stories mixed up. I'm not even really sure if he really said that, but that's what he claims. And they came back with an offer of $2.8 million per year, which is consistent with what he's always said, all the way back to the Wrestling with Shadows documentary back in '98. He said the same thing, 2.8, and that's a lot of money. And that was able to, leverage himself against WCW with WWE to get as much money from Vince as he can during a time when Vince is kind of struggling. So Vince has no way of being able to match that money of almost $9 million a year. So he was able to get Bret to agree to a 20-year deal. Now, we all knew this, but I never knew how much it was for. Well, I finally heard that figure for the first time tonight. Maybe other people knew. I've never heard it, but apparently it was 10.5. So WCW was offering him nearly $9 million. WWE would give him 10.5, but it would be over 20 years. So that's significantly less money. That's a lot less money. But he was going to take it because he just didn't want to leave WWE, and he knew that Bret Hart was going to be shit in WCW. And that's the saddest part here, is that he knew all along he had no future there, and he's got to try to avoid getting there. But now, and this is kind of significant to what we saw WWE do with Braun Strowman's contract, when WWE had all that money to spend prior to the pandemic, and he negotiated himself a big fat deal, and here that now they're like regretting that deal and say, okay, we're just going to release you. And this isn't, the same situation, but it's kind of the same situation because Bret negotiated the highest deal he could possibly get from Vince, which made Vince regret it. But that's not Bret's fault. What do you expect him to do? WCW's offered him nearly $3 million a year. So you kind of understand both sides. But here in the biography, Bret says that he was going to take the deal no matter what Vince said. So if he was going to take the deal and he did not want to leave WWE and he was going to stay there no matter what, if I was Bret, if he really means that, if I was Bret, I wouldn't have taken the meeting with Eric Bischoff. I'd rather not know. If I'm going to put loyalty first, then I don't want to know what they're going to pay me because that's going to eat at me. I'm like, man, every time I would get upset or every time I would be disgruntled or have, any reason to be frustrated with my job in WWE, I'm going to be thinking about that money that I could have gotten. I always just think that Bret should have saved himself the stress and just not even taken the meeting if he really means what he says about he wouldn't have left WWE and taken anything Vince gave him. So, you can kind of see both sides here. Vince, in that whole bullshit they did on Raw after the screw job with the sit-down interview with Jim Ross, he talked about how Bret took the negotiations to leverage, a better deal or whatever. I'm like, what the fuck do you expect? He's a businessman. So, I think... Bret maybe shouldn't have just taken the meeting. That way he wouldn't have known, but it was able to get him more money out of Vince. But, as we would see, that would not last very long. So now Bret's back in the WWE. He kicks off his feud with Stone Cold Steve Austin, which was phenomenal. Right off, to a great start at Survivor Series in 1996 with a insane match in Madison Square Garden, which was so good, a feud that would take them into WrestleMania, and Bret would talk about. And this was how the seeds of him turning heel all started, was with Austin. He was such a piece of shit during this, and Bret's my favorite wrestler, and I'm watching this bald asshole, be such an asshole, and he cost Bret the title against Sid on Raw. I was so pissed, but at the same time, you liked Austin. Even though he was in a feud with my favorite wrestler, I couldn't hate Steve Austin. He was too fucking awesome to hate, even if he is beating up Bret Hart. But I was still taking Bret's side, but I was into Austin. But this motherfucker, man, he was messing with Bret so much, and Bret talked about that in the biography. He's like, this is the worst heel ever. He's doing the most heelish shit that any heel could ever dream of, and the fans are cheering him. Here I'm the hero. I'm trying to do everything right, and I'm starting to be booed, and, my reactions are becoming less and less large and, a little underwhelming, maybe a little flat at times. What the fuck? And everybody's going nuts over this heel. And that's kind of where the birth of the idea to turn him heel started. So they would go into WrestleMania 13, have the awesome match. We all know about it. The blood, the sharpshooter, the deal. Austin passes out. Bret continues the attack, kind of solidifies his heel turn there. Austin loses, and it's, the best double turn probably ever pulled off in wrestling was done right there at WrestleMania 13. And that's another match that was so critical in the careers of both guys and so awesome, to me as a fan. So now Bret's officially a heel. He attacks a babyface Shawn Michaels. He reconciles with Owen and Davey. They form the Hart Foundation, and then it becomes Canada versus USA feud. And they didn't spend a ton of time on it, but they did talk about it here that, that Bret Hart started taking, the Canadian side and kind of turning it into a war of countries like that. But they didn't spend a lot of time on it until they moved on to what the real issue was, and that was with Shawn and Bret, which was going on throughout all of this. So they had personal issues with each other that started bubbling after Shawn won the title at WrestleMania 12. And they talked about sunny days. They've talked about sunny days every time, whenever discussing these two guys. And they brought it up here, Shawn's sunny days promo that got Bret some heat at home, because we already know he's honest about this. So I can say this on the, on the podcast here. I'm not saying anything that he's not admitted himself. He said it in his book. He said it everywhere. He was not faithful to Julie. So he's got enough problems as it is in his marriage and with his family, which is what he said here. And for Sean to make that comment about something that wasn't true when Sean was the one that was fucking her, we all know that. And Sean even said here on the biography, he goes, I was running around with Sonny, and then I knew her and Bret had become friends, so I insinuated that something must have been going on there, and that got Bret some issues at home. One of his daughters confronted him and all of this, and it's got to be very hard for kids. I've been there. I've had divorced parents. I know what that's like. And so, for them to have that and see that, what did Sean mean by that and shit like that? It got him in trouble, especially when it wasn't true. And so he was so pissed about it. He barged into the dressing room in Hartford and grabbed a hold of Sean's hair and just swung him around the locker room until he tore out a squirrel-sized hunk of it. So they talked about that. They didn't elaborate too much on the aftermath, because I've always been curious how that all came back together. After this fight, here we thought Sean was gone. He's in WCW. There's no way. I also think this fight might have had something to do with Vince, maybe asking Bret to leave because Sean came back right before that, and maybe Sean was like, it's either him or me. A lot of people have speculated on that. But after that fight, we all thought he was going to go to WCW, and it was really kind of touch and go there with Sean. So I want to know how he was brought back into the fold, because then he was the guest referee in Bret's match. It's very similar. It's kind of, even though there's not a woman involved, it's very similar to Edge and Matt Hardy. I was blown away that those two guys were able to work together after what happened. It's when it was happening. It's not even like it was years after the fact. It was in the middle of it happening. So the fact that these guys have gotten in a shoot in the locker room, now they're going to be back kind of involved in a similar storyline and probably be heading for a match against each other at some point, was pretty crazy that they were able to, kind of work together and get it all done. And I'm curious how that all came together and what Vince had to do to convince these guys to please goddamn get along before we die and WCW kills us for good. So then, of course, after that, we fast forward to after SummerSlam. Bret wins the title for the 5th time, and now it's Raw and MSG when McMahon gets stunned over on the other show. You got Goldberg debuting in WCW on that same night. And that's when Vince tells Bret he wants out of his deal, and Vince is on the biography here, and he says, we just couldn't afford it, and we were like, I wonder if he can go get that other deal from WCW. And Vince legitimately did want him to go and get that money. He wanted him out of there, and that's what I talked about when we opened up here. The timing on it is just so weird when you look back on it now, because hindsight is always 20/20. But Vince, being the businessman that he is, thinking about where they were at the time, they are on the ropes. They are getting their asses kicked by WCW. Even during the Canada USA stuff, which was very good, even the smart not internet fans, but the smart marks and the smarks and shit like that, like myself back in those days, insisted that the Hart Foundation was a better faction than the NWO. They had better resumes. They could kick their ass in a fight. I kind of still believe that. But the NWO was a much more over faction. They were the hottest thing. It wasn't Hart Foundation shirts everywhere. It was NWO shirts. So even with the strength of Bret, Austin, Canada, USA, and all that stuff, they were still losing. They were losing hard to WCW. So when you think about that, and Bret's the champion, the only other people you have to fall back on are Taker, who you just put the belt on at WrestleMania, took the belt off of. Austin just took the pile driver from Owen. You don't even know if he's going to wrestle again. Well, maybe by then you think he's probably going to be okay, but still pretty sketchy, I'm sure, with Steve Austin. He's not back in the ring yet, wouldn't return for a couple of more months. And Sean has been really fucking weird all year long. He lost his smile, then he wanted out of his contract because it was an unsafe working environment. So it was just unstable at the time. To me, not the time to lose the most stable thing you have in your company. A good champion that's going to go out there and perform and give you what you need every single night. I can understand Vince wanting out of the deal. I can understand Vince saying, okay, we just can't afford this bullshit. But I think even as desperate as times were for them at the time financially, they could have held out a little bit. They could have easily afforded to wait until December or maybe even WrestleMania and have Bret put over Steve again, which would have been awesome. A rematch from WrestleMania 13 probably would have been hard to top what they did the previous year. But now title's on the line. Now you're passing the torch. Bret takes a stunner right in the middle of the ring at WrestleMania 14. Austin beats him. And then you know how at WrestleMania 14, they put the Austin shirt over Sean. Maybe they do that to Bret, or maybe they go get a WCW flag or shirt out of the audience and lay it over Bret's carcass, and you send him down to WCW. I would have rather Bret left that way. That would have been awesome. You know, he would put Steve over in the main event. It would have been a big deal, and then he could have gone down to WCW. But Instead, Vince, it felt like a rash, rushed decision that man, why did it have to be right then? Why did you have to shed his contract immediately? And I know it was like 90 days. He wanted 90 days to get out of it, but I think you could have waited like another 90. If you got a 20-year deal, what's paying him another 6 months? Does that really matter in the grand scheme of a 20-year deal? You're still getting out easy if you can get this guy off your payroll and stuff. But I think waiting would have been better. And I've talked about it several times throughout the years that had the screw job not happened, lots of things in wrestling would be different. Lots of stuff. Namely, Owen Hart would probably still be alive. So you can even trace it back to these negotiations or this conversation with Bret. What if Vince just waited until October or November to have this conversation with Bret, or a little bit longer, or there's some sort of trajectory that would have, maybe been able to put a nice bow on the Hart Foundation storyline instead of them all just leaving the way they did, and leaving Owen there all by himself for him just to flounder and do nothing and then slap the blue blazer gimmick on him. So, maybe some of that would have helped change his trajectory and maybe he'd still be alive. And who knows? I think Austin could have still gotten on the map, but I think Bret and Shawn still would have been obstacles for each other. They still would have been a headache for Vince. And Vince, I guess at the time, probably the main reason is here, he had to choose between Bret and Shawn. And maybe his thinking is, hey, WCW's kicking their ass. I got to think long-term. Bret's 40. Shawn's younger. I can ride more years with Shawn. Bret's slowing down. Maybe that's Vince's thought, I guess. But still, even if all of that is true, and I'm not saying it is, I just think Vince should have maybe slept on it. It felt like it was a decision he's just made right away, or I got to talk to him right now or whatever. I just think they could have waited and things would have been an awfully lot better. But anyway, they talk about that, how, Vince wants him out. And that was it. I think Bret even knew. We've seen this. He's talked about this multiple times. We've seen it in Wrestling with Shadows. I think the moment that he faxed that notice to WWE, that was the end of his career, and he knew it. He knew it. He knew they weren't going to do shit with him down there, and they didn't. He had no highlights. He talks about the steel plate with Goldberg. That's it. Everything else was a complete fucking mess down there. So that was essentially the end of Bret Hart. It was really, September of 97. Because, after that conversation, think about what Bret did on TV. Not much. The very next In Your House, or Bad Blood, he wrestled on the undercard in a tag team match on the same day Brian Pillman died. Shawn and Taker were the spotlight there. Should have been able to see it coming. Dirt Sheet started reporting that Bret was leaving for WCW, so he was almost kind of cast aside. But it's still pretty amazing that Vince decides to have this conversation with a guy with creative control in his contract who's wearing your championship fucking belt. People who take Vince's side in the screw job, well, you didn't want Bret to go over to WCW with the belt, did you? No. Vince could have easily avoided that by having him drop the belt before this conversation took place. Why didn't he do that? Just not even I'd say it said maybe wait a few months, not even a few months. Wait a month. Have Bret drop the belt at Ground Zero or Hell in the Cell or what the fuck ever. Bret even said, as we're going to get into the screw job here in a minute, that Bret would have dropped the belt to Steve Austin or Steve Lombardi. He didn't care, which I don't think is entirely true. I don't think Bret would have dropped the belt to Steve Lombardi. If you really gave Bret a choice to drop the belt to Steve Lombardi or Shawn, you got to really hate Shawn to pick Steve Lombardi in that scenario, but that's what Bret claims. So when you look back at the timing, it was just odd, and it would lead into, what is, aside from Owen Hart, was one of the most gutting things for me, when I think of the worst things, ever. It's like Owen, when it comes to deaths, of course, it's like Owen and Benoit. That's just super gnarly. But when it comes just to things that really bummed me out and made me feel like my pet died, was the screw job. Number one, the screw job. Randy Savage leaving in 1994. And the Undertaker streak ending, I think, are kind of the three big ones that I'm like, I wish we could have those back. I just wish we could have those back. And, this is one of them. This all sucks. And it was all stemming from Bret and Shawn's heat. Vince, ever the genius he is around this time with his horrible timing, decides that after he's told Bret this, he's going to ask Bret to drop the belt to the one guy he has fucking problems with in the locker room. And he's going to insist that it has to be him. Boy, Vince, I'm not sure looking back how smart of a businessman you really are. This seems like this seems like stupid to me. These seems like really stupid decisions to make right here, based on, where they were at the time. So they highlight this here pretty well in the biography, and this was hard. It's still hard for Bret to talk about. You could feel it here, and they talked about, how Bret and Shawn had those issues and how Shawn had told him he would never put him over prior to the Survivor Series match being made. And then when Vince makes the Survivor Series match, he's like, Vince, I'm not putting this fucker over. Little prick already told me he's not going to lose to me, so he can go fuck himself. And that caused all sorts of problems. Bret wore a wire. It went all the way down to the wire at Survivor Series. They didn't really have a finish worked out. And they showed that in Wrestling with Shadows in multiple places, that they had the Biography crew there, that's the craziest thing looking back. And I think that's why there was an urban legend for so long that this shit was a work, because, man, the cameras were there for all of this, which is incredible. That we actually have footage. We don't have the punch, but we have the aftermath of what happened to Vince and Bret backstage, with Vince kind of stumbling off with a black eye and the twisted ankle, and Bret fucked him up something good. And all of that was happening with the Wrestling with Shadows documentary team there. So Bret wore a wire into the meeting with Vince. We all know that. And Vince agreed that the match would be a disqualification, but you can hear the frustration in Vince's voice. I've talked about this before as well. When you hear that recording, Vince says, I'm determined that this is going to end the right way. He's almost telling Bret, like, I'm going to get what I goddamn want, goddamn it, So he's frustrated. You could tell he's frustrated. And Bret had to know. I think he did know. I think he did know that it was a possibility, because he told the story about how, or he didn't tell it here, but he's told the story in the past how he did talk to Earl, and Earl swore on his kids and the whole deal. He didn't really mention that here in this particular biography, but definitely they highlighted the screw job and what happened and how Vince rang the bell. Vince talked about how Bret spit in his face. He goes, Bret's a good spitter. So it was kind of funny. And his family, his daughters, we're talking about how they could see that really affected him. Because another crazy part about that night, not only was Wrestling with Shadows were there, so was his whole family, who have backstage passes and access to everything. Blade, Hart, his small, youngest son, I should say, is all over that building that day, fucking around with Sonny, hiding in the locker room. They know it's Bret's last night. You even see Julie and Sonny talking, which is crazy after the Sunny Days stuff. And they were all such a part of that. So not only was Bret there to get screwed by Vince, his entire fucking family had to watch this happen. They're all backstage. Julie lays into Triple H, which was classic, in that documentary. So all that was happening all at the same time, and it just made everything extra weird. But his family and his kids talked about how much they could see that hurt her dad. I think it was Jade that said, I'd never seen my dad cry before. Until he was in the plane, flying home and just realizing what the hell had just happened. Man, my whole life, 14 years with this company, just ended in an explosion, in a fiery crash. It's just horrible. So as a fan, I didn't even know what to think, man. I didn't know whose side to take. I didn't really know quite the story. I mean, I sat there, my jaw dropped. I watched Survivor Series live on pay-per-view with my friends, and we had another kid that we knew that I guess kind of followed like dirt sheet news. I was temporarily not following it so much. So I really wasn't aware of what was going on. We immediately called him like, what the fuck is going on? He's like, Bret's going to WCW apparently. And they just took the belt off of him. And I think it was a screw job and blah, blah, blah. And then you started hearing what happened. And I didn't know what to think. As a Bret Hart, super mark, I was like, oh, what do I do? I don't like WCW. I don't like WCW. I hate them. I fucking hated WCW. And my favorite wrestler is going to go there. I'm like, okay, what do I do? Am I still a Bret Hart fan? Am I a WCW fan now? What do I do? What am I supposed to do? What am I supposed to do? I was confused as ever. I was a confused adolescent or confused 20-year-old. My God, I did not know what to do. Did not know what to think. Was freaking out and I just hated it. It was just a heartbreaking thing for a Bret Hart fan to go through. And oh my God, so crazy. And now he's off. He's off to WCW. They spent very little time on it, on WCW, as we'll talk about in a minute. But they basically just said that he went there, and then they fast forward about 2 years until we get to Over the Edge. And this is when they get into Owen, which we knew wasn't going to be fun. They show footage of Bret Hart at Owen's gravesite in the cemetery there. And I think his sister Allison said it best. And she just said a very simple line that, kind of took me back. And she said, we'll never forget her. We will never get over Owen. We will never forget him, or we'll never stop missing him. And that's about as simple as a statement as you can make about Owen Hart, because it's true. To this day, I've done commentaries on Owen. My last one I did was on his 20th anniversary of his death. And every time I ever talk about this situation, I say it feels as painful as the day it happened. There's just something about this one. Natalia, even here in the documentary, says that it's the worst thing that's ever happened in wrestling. I mean, maybe now with Benoit might have topped that, but in terms of in a wrestling ring and the tragic nature of this because of what a good person Owen was, and at the end of the day, how Owen really didn't give a fuck about wrestling. He just wanted to be with his family and make some money and secure his future, and, that's all. And they put him in a goddamn bird costume and dropped him from the ceiling. It's just crazy, man, and then on top of that, he's a Hart kid. The entire family is wrestling, and now they've lost someone to wrestling. And I know Bret said several times that, it was really hard on his dad. He thinks Stu probably could have, he could have probably survived the loss a little better if it just wasn't connected to wrestling. It was just a heartbreaking death. So that was horrible to kind of relive there, but they talked about Owen and, how great he was, and, how that was really the beginning of the downhill landslide or spiral that would happen to this family. Shortly after that, Stu and Helen both passed away. I think Helen passed away first. And then Stu, he didn't really last much longer after Helen. And I know he died in 2003. I remember when he died. And, and then right after that, you lose Owen, you lose your parents, and then you have a career, he didn't lose his parents yet, but then Bret in WCW, shortly after Owen's death, would have his career ended in the match with Goldberg. And this was really all they talked about in terms of WCW. And then we were waiting for Bret to show up, and he finally showed up here at the end when he talked about Goldberg. And he goes, when it comes to wrestlers, if you're grading them from a 0 out of 10, then Goldberg is a 0. He just said he's a 0. So there's our Bret. Never stops burying the world. I popped. Thought it was great. He's not entirely wrong. I've never thought Goldberg has ever known what he's doing. But he nearly kicked Bret's head off there. You can't blame Bret for being a little bitter about that. I mean, if Austin can be bitter about Owen, I'm sorry. We don't crucify Austin for being angry at Owen. So I guess we really can't be the same way to Bret. They put an unsafe guy in the ring with him, and it cost, one of the greatest wrestlers ever his career. Not sure how long Bret would have really stayed in the ring anyway. He was probably 42, probably my age, 42 or 43, heading into that match. So it's not like he'd be wrestling forever or anything, but I would have much rather had a better ending for Bret, at least as a fan. Would have been really cool to see some sort of a retirement match for him, or some sort of send-off that we really never got that everybody else did. It's just, for a Bret Hart fan, it sucks. I really wish I could have sat, watched, experienced, and felt his last match. I was never really able to do that. After that, he would have the stroke. This took place in 2002, prior to Stu's death. He was riding his bike. I think he hit a pothole, fell over, stroke. Lucky to survive. Apparently had to do a lot of rehab, learning how to walk and things like that. And I remember hearing about this in 2003 and being a little bit freaked out and trying to get as much information as I could. Sent Bret a long email in 2003 wishing him the best, because I think I went to, back then there was no Twitter and shit, so I think I went to Bret's website and just got his email and just, sent him a long letter and just want you to know I'm thinking about you, hope everything's okay, and you're in my thoughts, and just good luck, and, told him what his career meant for me, or, and shit like that. So I was concerned, and the fact that he was able to rehab out of that and get better and recover is a miracle and pretty awesome. And he talked about, I never knew this, but apparently Julie was a really big help to him, getting, kind of back on his feet, because she is the mother of his kids, and she was a big help. And I'm glad that they, maintained a good relationship. And Bret talked about that. He said they got along really, really well 50% of the time. And the other 50% of the time, it was pretty ugly. And Bret's owned up to all of his mistakes with Julie. And I always thought Julie was great. She was so pretty when she was younger. Her and I exchanged DMs 8 years ago or something. And I talked to her a little bit through Twitter DMs, and she was really, really, really nice. And she's always seemed like a cool person, and they talked about that earlier on. I didn't mention it, but they talked about how they got together and how they met. They bonded over their love of music. And Bret was a cool guy, he liked Beatles and Bob Dylan, and shit like that. So I appreciate that from Bret, and how they kind of got together prior to him really getting going in wrestling. But they had a rough marriage there, and it didn't work out. But I'm relieved to know that since they share 4 kids together, that they get along now, and they have a good relationship, and that just was heartwarming. And they would talk about Bret's current wife here at the end of the gig. We're now, a few years later. They don't really talk about Bret in the Hall of Fame. At least I don't remember seeing it here. They kind of fast forward to 2010, and this, of course, was when Bret returned to WWE after all this time. He briefly came back in 05 and 06. They put him in the Hall of Fame. They did the DVD. He kind of had some working agreements with him, but he didn't appear at WrestleMania 22 when they brought the Hall of Fame inductees out there. He still wasn't ready, still wanted to fucking murder Shawn. It took another 4 years for him to kind of get over that. And that was important to me too. It was kind of odd, the way it went down. We'll talk about it. But, for me as a fan, Shawn and Bret were two of my favorites. Shawn was so stupidly good. Even after, even we knew he was involved in that screw job. And even though I definitely thought he was a prick for the most part, I still just really liked his work and liked him as a character. And everybody, talks about 1994 and 1995 not being the greatest years. They weren't. When you look back, they were terrible. But for me as a fan, they were still really pivotal. Like in terms of how I remember them. And, Bret and Shawn were really, they were really the highlights of what was not a very good WWE product at the time. And that's when I really, began to fall in love with Shawn's work. Was around that time. It was like post 93. Then I'm like, holy cow, this guy's good. So for them to come back and kind of have this in-ring thing here was really important for me to see as a wrestling fan. So they talk about that. Bret comes back. By this point, for me as a fan, it was bittersweet. I was glued to the TV, obviously, on January 4th. I wasn't watching Impact. I was watching this. And it was going to be a huge deal for me personally. But it was also bittersweet because it was so many years too late, I felt. Bret looked older, and that's just life. We all get old. It's not his fault, but he came out and he just looked a little bit older and not exactly the Bret that we remember, but he got a huge ovation from the audience. And then he called out Shawn Michaels and they had the little face-to-face. And the only thing that was funny about this is that Shawn looked so ridiculous in his DX shit when all this was going on. I almost think like Shawn should have wore street clothes or something out there. He looked, these guys are trying to bury the hatchet of a 14-year rivalry. The craziest thing to ever happen inside of a wrestling ring, non-death related, of course, with these two guys. And, and you're dressed like a 14-year-old kid. It looked weird. But to see them together and kind of shake hands, the hug was super awkward. I don't think it meant as much to Bret at that point than it did to Shawn. I think it took a couple of years later when Bret started to get to know Shawn on a personal level, because at the point of this handshake in the ring, they had only had the brief encounter at catering. They hadn't talked to each other in years and years and years. So they didn't get to really know each other until after this. So you can see it's visible on Bret's face. We can't pretend it's not there. The apprehension in hugging Shawn Michaels, the one-armed little pat hug, and he's looking up at the Tron. He's not even, it wasn't an embrace with your eyes closed. Neither guy was crying. Bret was like, I could tell he wasn't ready yet. It wasn't until they spent some time together. They did the sit-down DVD, which I have up there of Austin or Shawn and Bret with Jim Ross moderating that. And they talked about everything and they got into it and both of them shed tears. And, that was when I felt like they really bonded and got to know each other. And now when you hear Bret talk about Shawn, he's like, he's a completely different person. Up until this handshake, Bret thought or Shawn's religious stuff was bullshit. He just thought he was, making it up or whatever. He had to see it for his own eyes. He had to get to know Shawn. And I think that's when he warmed up to him. But I don't think he was ready here at the time of this handshake. It was written all over his face. But it was a healing moment that was important to both. And Shawn talked about it here in the biography. And I think, how important it was to him. And I know that was something that was like kind of looming over his head because he had kind of tried to make amends. Shawn is still not perfect. Shawn still has his problems and he could still be Shawn even after being born again and stuff. But he's really, for the most part, had his shit together since 2002, in terms of, his abuse problems and drinking and shit and substance abuse and shit like that. He's been clean. He's been great. He's been sober. He can still probably be a prick at times, but it's his own, that's his own personality. That's not the drugs talking kind of thing. So, he really cleaned himself up well, and I think that he still had regrets. I think he still really wanted to make up for the screw job, and I think it was the only thing really stopping him from retiring. And I think at the time, like I said, it meant more to Shawn. When Bret forgave him, and they shook hands and they hugged, it was immediate after that, right, that Shawn, they made the match with Undertaker retirement match. I think that was the last, looming regret. Shawn's, given back 8 years. I've always said that about Shawn Michaels' second run when he came back in 2002. I said that 8 years, I feel like, was his apology to the wrestling business. He never won the title. He only main evented one WrestleMania, or two, I guess, when he retired. But he had the title match with Cena and he lost. They couldn't resist throwing the belt at him when he first came back in 2002. They gave him the world title, but for a month, and he never touched gold again. I think he was tag champ, right? But he never really was in a title program. Didn't need to be. Had awesome feuds with Triple H for the title that he never won. other awesome non-title feuds, with guys like Kurt Angle and stuff, and he just did an excellent job outperforming everyone every night, putting everybody over in one way or the other, and he never really won a title again. He just went out there and performed his balls off and performed, for the most part, unselfishly, and, just did a really good job and didn't really care about, having the limelight and the showstopper and follow that, and I'm the champ, and I got to have the strap, and I'm not going to drop the strap, and I'm going to lose my smile or whatever. He just did business, and he conducted himself, I think, the way he wished he would have conducted himself in his earlier run, and I think that was his way of just making amends for that. He's like, I was a son of a bitch in the 90s for all these people who had to work with me. I want to be different, and I want to give, WWE and the fans and everybody that career. So when Bret made up with him here, that was the only regret I feel like Shawn really had left that he had to rectify. And as soon as that was all put to bed, it gave him peace. It gave him peace of mind. Next thing you know, his match with Undertaker was a retirement match, and this is it. Literally 3 months later, he was able to retire. And that's all he needed. He needed that moment with Bret. Once it happened, he could go off into the sunset happy. And he did, up until when he came back in Saudi Arabia, which I'll never forgive you for, Shawn. But that was all really heartwarming to see that, these two guys, Bret said, he goes, if I would have seen them prior to this, I would have killed them if they would have bumped into each other in the airport. Have you ever seen Cable Guy? Jim Carrey in the bathroom beats the fuck out of Owen Wilson, just slams his head into the air dryer and gives him a swirly and all that. I just envision a scene like that, like Bret running into Shawn in an airport bathroom and just beating the piss out of him. So, Bret's always said that that's what he was going to do and shit. And so the fact that they were able to come together here, have the shake of hands and put it all behind him, and Shawn is able to go into WrestleMania 26 now, lose the match to Undertaker and retire, and he was, and he made peace, and that was that's good to see. It wasn't the greatest story. It's got a happy-ish ending, or whatever. But I still think there was a lot of regrets, and I still think there's a lot of time lost that we could have had with Bret prior to this. And of course, they talked about the WrestleMania 26 match with Vince, which I hated. It was cool it was a cool story. The Harts were out there, and Bret got to get his revenge by screwing Vince. But it wasn't a really good match. Vince and Hogan was so much better, had so much more drama. And this one all just seemed like a big, almost kind of like circus. And it was Vince. I think a lot of ways it was Vince's apology. It was Vince's apology to Bret, for his part in the screw job. You know what? I'm going to let you and your whole family go out there and just take a shit on me right there in the middle of the ring at WrestleMania. And, that'll just show you how sorry I am, and I'm glad you're back, and, that sort of thing. So luckily for everybody involved here, this was a happy ending. It could have been so much worse, especially had Bret, passed away during the stroke. Imagine if that would have happened. This would have been heartbreaking for me. Been absolutely gutting, especially at that time we're losing so many guys. Owen and Pillman and Rick Rude and maybe Hennig hadn't quite died yet, or he might have. That was right around the same time. And Elizabeth and Road Warrior Hawk and all those guys were all right around that time of Bret Hart's stroke. That would have been too much to bear, and I'm just so glad, and there would have been so much leftover regret. WWE would have done probably endless and countless documentaries on Bret, just trying to, just do whatever they can to, they've probably just felt so guilty about how it all ended, and they were never able to reconcile. So I'm just glad that Bret recovered from that, and here we are 18 years later after the stroke, and Bret seems to be happier than ever. And they kind of end the whole thing by introducing us to his wife. Now, I was aware that he was married to Stephanie. I know they got married, I think in 2010, 10 or 11 years ago they got married. She's vastly younger than him. I think when they were married, he was 58. He was 53. She was 28. I think he's 63 and she's 38 now. And they've got an age difference there and a race difference. And they said they did have some pushback from that, especially from Bret's kids, more about the age thing, of course. And they were a little hesitant until they got to see their dad with her and see how happy they were. Their wedding pictures were beautiful. She's gorgeous. Way to go, Bret. Way to go, Bret, 63-year-old. Pretty awesome. I mean, she just seems lovely. And they love each other. She seems to take care of him. That's all I ask of her. Girl, you better take care of him because that's our Bret, and don't fuck him over or we coming for you. But he seems genuinely happy despite everything. And they talked about how they had to face that adversity in their relationship until people saw them together, saw how happy they were and grew to accept them. And now, there's no issues and it's all great. And the whole thing kind of closes with Bret Hart. This was the best part of the whole thing for me because like I said, everything they talked about here, I mostly knew. So this was the best part is at the very end, you see Bret with all of his kids. Then you got some grandkids out there. They're playing ball. It's our first look on the whole show of Dallas and Blade. I haven't laid eyes on these kids. Last time I saw Blade, I think it was at the Hall of Fame. And by then he was probably a teenager. Now he's much older. So is Dallas. Dallas used to be featured a little bit in WWE's magazine. They got him involved there. He would write a little column or a piece. And the fans back in like 94, we all knew who Dallas was because Bret would talk about him a lot. And we've seen his other kids in Wrestling with Shadows, his girls. I think they're Ashley and Beans and Jade. Is there an Ashley? There might not be. Maybe that's Flair's daughter. I forgot. But to see all of them grown up now, Jade's beautiful. They are all well-adjusted looking kids. Dallas looks a little different. So does Blade. Blade was such a cute kid when he was running around there, messing around with Sonny and everything. He was hysterical. And Bret always told a lot of stories about Blade, how crazy he was when he was a little kid. So, they didn't elaborate too much on their lives. I hope they're doing all right. I hope they don't have any issues or demons or they're not battling anything. I hope they're doing well. I don't know what Dallas and Blade do for a living or anything like that. So just whatever they do, I hope they're all just doing well and they're happy and they're healthy and all that stuff. So to see Bret kind of standing out there with the gray hair, because it's crazy enough for me to see Bret with gray hair. It blows my mind. So he's out there, he's just a heavier old guy now. He's 63 and he's out there, old man, watching his kids and his grandkids play. That is the highlight of the biography for me, because all this other shit I knew, but to be able to see Bret with my own eyes and say, yeah, he's doing really well. He's still going to have that bitterness to him. That's just the way Bret is, and there's a lot of things he's going to carry with him, but overall he's happy. And most importantly, he's in a good spot and a good place in his life. Whenever he does an interview, I'm sure he's going to shit on Ric Flair and Goldberg and Eric Bischoff and WCW and all the things he normally says, because that's just Bret. But other than that, in his life, he seems to be at peace. That's all I want. That's all I want. I want Bret to die at 95 years old. I hope he's around for another 30 years. I really do, because, he was a big deal. I just need somebody not to die, please. And luckily for me, my favorite wrestler is still alive when so many others are passed away. So all in all, it was a fantastic biography, a really good episode. Like I said, I think it was the perfect one to close with, because Bret's got a really interesting career and a really interesting life, whole family. It's fucking crazy, man. So it was a good look at everything here, and I'm glad I watched it. Even if it's stuff we already knew, I don't care. It's always just good to see a 2-hour, documentary on my favorite wrestler ever. How are we not going to watch this and talk about it? So, what'd y'all think so far? Oh, Tobias thinks it's the worst episode ever. Well, I think it's the best. So fuck you, Tobias. We said no Bret bashing in here. You're out of here. Yeah, Bret. They didn't talk. I don't think they talked much, Mike, about the King of the Ring '93. That was a great night. One of my favorites either. Although Lawler spoiled it. Yeah, I'll read over here, see if you guys have some Bret Hart memories. Bret is a goat. That's true. I'm not sure, Jose, which pay-per-view watch-along I'm going to do next, but I'm thinking about it. Next 2 weeks, got a couple of pay-per-views in your house and Hell in the Cell, so we'll get back to that here before the month is over. Yeah, Julie, Heartstrings, I was aware of that as well. Yeah, that was, we've seen photos and we've seen footage even of Owen Hart's grave before, but, this is all very current, so Bret to... walk back up there and, just look at Owen's grave has got to be hard. I don't know. The Hart House is a bucket list thing for me. I don't think I need to see Owen's grave. I'm not into that. It's a little morbid. I don't want to see Eddie Guerrero's grave and shit like that. But maybe Owens, Owens is pretty elaborate. It's got that big headstone and stuff, and, might be cool to maybe go pay my respects. But that's, if I ever visited any wrestler grave, it would only be his. Honestly, it would probably only be his, and I'm not even that interested in doing that. But I would at least think about it if I would go if I was in the area. But the Hart House is something I want to see. I just want to visualize it with my own eyes, take a picture, just see it, and touch it. See if I can take a brick home, or I don't know, something like that is definitely a bucket list thing for me. But all in all, really good, really really good episode. Cruising over here to Twitter. There we go. I'm back. All right, Ben, you taking off tomorrow? Yeah, we'll see you tomorrow for Monday Night Raw. I'm going to be getting out of here in a minute, too, since we're done. Oh, yeah, so Kurt Angle is... I got to still listen to Kurt Angle's podcast because I have not listened to many of it. Mamaka International says, Kurt, a few weeks ago on his podcast, said that Bret Hart is hands down the best of all time. Best of all time is debatable. I don't I'm not going to use any loyalty to debate who's the best of all time. My favorite of all time is Bret. Everybody else can debate who the best is. I'm not really interested in the best. I'm interested in my favorite. That's what Bret is. You can make arguments for a lot of people, including the guy that's saying it, Kurt Angle, because, there's many people that would probably feel that Kurt Angle is a better wrestler than Bret Hart. And how can I really argue with that? Dude's an Olympian. Dude's awesome. He's not my favorite, but I can maybe at least listen to an argument that he's better. And I'll tell you what, that's probably the one dream match I think we wish we had, is like 95 Bret, and give me a year on Kurt. What's peak Kurt? I wouldn't even say 2003 because that was all the next shit. Do you think peak Kurt would be like either 2000, between 2000 and 2002, maybe 2002 Kurt against 95 Bret? Oh, give me that. Give me some of that. I want seconds. Daddy wants seconds. 2 out of 3 falls match, Iron Man match, anything. I mean, that would just be a phenomenal match. It would be so stupidly good. Oh my God, it would be good. Give me get Kurt Angle a little bit younger and have him travel back in time to 1995 and put Kurt and Bret in Your House. Oh, give me some. Wrestling Machine 2005. 05 was good, Kurt Angle. Yeah, 05 Angle and 95 Bret would be good. Yeah, I'd agree with that. 05 Angle was stupidly good. Those matches he had with Shawn and stuff, my God. Yeah, I know Ashley is Charlotte. I was talking about Bret. I would have sworn back in the day, Bret, in like Wrestling with Shadows, there's a scene where he's like on the bed playing a video game, and he's with his daughter, and she's giving him shit, and he's like, Ashley, I'm trying my best, or something like that. So I think there's an Ashley in there somewhere. But yeah, I actually, Charlotte actually has mutual friends with one of my friends. So I'm well aware of that. One of my friends went to Appalachian State with Charlotte, played volleyball with her. I agree with you, Sonic. Yeah, I know, Mike Witt. We've thought about that too. I know we spent a good time about that on a podcast one time. We talked about a what-if scenario if Bret wouldn't have gotten injured by Goldberg. That would have been a whole different deal, because then you got to talk about the buyout, which would have happened in 2001. I think Bret might have came back, because that very same night of the buyout, Shawn got fired. Shawn was fucked up backstage, and they sent his ass home. Say, get your shit together and don't come back until you're a Christian or something like that. So he left that very same night. So, Bret might have been wanting to take that $2.8 million. So I don't think he would have come in. I think he would have stayed out with everybody else. But hell, his contract would have been up by then. Right? Yeah, so he probably had no deal then. So yeah, if he wouldn't have, he could have came back then. But I still think there was a lot. Bret was still, pretty bitter about everything. He might not have been able to resist, though, the idea of having a WrestleMania match, or maybe having an angle with Vince or something like that. He might have been able to reconcile, and with Shawn not being there, that would have helped. Now, when Shawn came back the following year, that would have presented problems. When they're bringing Shawn back, and then Shawn was going to work with Triple H, the match to have is with Bret. So if Bret was not injured and never injured in the Goldberg match, and then he came back in the WWE, where would Bret have been in the Invasion? That would have been something to think about, where, if he would have stayed with WCW, if he would have gone to WWE, probably would have gone back to WWE and fought on their side, I would imagine. But then when you fast forward to 2002 and Shawn decides to come back, that SummerSlam match doesn't need to be Shawn and Triple H. It needs to be Shawn and Bret. That would be some crazy shit, man. My God. I don't think it would have happened, though. I think Bret had a lot of hard feelings, and I don't think he liked Triple H. I think Bret, to this day, still doesn't like him. He blames him, because Triple H is a claimable. A lot of people claim it now. Jim Cornette, Vince Russo, and Triple H have all claimed to have the idea of the screw job. But I heard it from Triple H first. Triple H was the first guy I ever heard take credit for it. When he said, when they were in the meeting, and he goes, fuck him, If he doesn't want to do business for him. He was the first one to claim that happened. So I think Bret remembered that, and even mentioned in his book a little bit how, Triple H was a son of a bitch and all this stuff. So, when he came back in 2010, even in 2010, when he's willing to make up with Shawn, and I know him and Triple H have had conversations and shit like that and interactions, I don't think Bret likes him. I don't think Bret's ever liked him. And I think he largely blames Triple H for being a part of that because Triple H was in on it too. He was in on the scheme, but Triple H was, he was able to maintain a friendship with Owen Hart through all of this. They worked together in 98. Triple H was extremely broken up about Owen on the night Owen died. The next night on Raw, he was one of the wrestlers that gave a testimonial on Owen and talked about him, and he was struggling to get through it, told a couple stories and stuff. They were cool with each other. Owen seemed to, be friends with everybody sort of thing. So you always wonder what that dynamic was like too. Did Owen really have no hard feelings against these guys? Did he just understand or whatever? It's probably how like somebody like, Christian probably felt around, or Jeff Hardy probably felt around Edge. So it doesn't really concern me, but you fucked over my brother, so I kind of think you're a piece of shit. So I'm curious how, how that all was back then with Owen. But apparently, I mean, if you judge Triple H's reaction to his death, it was they were pretty cool with each other. So yeah, Bret has always kind of blamed him a little bit, and I don't blame Bret for that. Thank you, Michael Kumo. Did Bret use other finishers before the sharpshooter? Not that I remember. With the Hart Foundation, of course, they were using their clothesline thing, their heart attack finisher. His first run, I don't think the 89 run he was using the sharpshooter yet. I think it was the second run when he started doing that. Yeah, it definitely was, because he said Conan taught him the move or something like that. So I think the first run, I'm curious what Bret was using for his finisher. I don't think it really mattered that he had one because he was losing more than he was winning. And I got to remember, how Sean had that slingshot suplex or whatever the fuck it was before the super kick. I'm trying to remember if Bret had something in that 89 run, because I think that's when it was. It was like 1989. They split them up. That's when Perfect came in, and Perfect and Bret worked everywhere. And they worked a couple of primetime wrestling matches, and I know they wrestled house shows. So I don't know if Bret had a finisher. I don't think he was doing the sharpshooter yet. Dream match, Bret Hart, Kurt Angle, and Mr. Perfect in a triple threat match. That would be interesting. You didn't have a lot of triple threat matches, back in Bret and Kurt and Perfect's day. You didn't have any, as a matter of fact. So Angle would be the master there. He'd have to work that match, tell these guys what to do. From what Cornette brought up the idea of the screw job. Well, I know Cornette said that. So you don't know any more than the rest of us, but a lot of guys have said it. So did Russo. Russo thinks he did. And Cornette he's had other interviews where he's talked about the screw job and not claimed to have come up with it. So Cornette's kind of not sure. I think in the latest one, of just the last couple of years, he said he was the one that came up with it. But Triple H said he was. I think they all kind of thought it in their head. It was probably a kind of a collective decision. Should we screw him? Yeah, should we screw him? I was just thinking that, that kind of thing. That's what I think maybe it was more similar to. That's why so many guys are claiming they had the idea. But one thing I do believe Cornette about is that it wasn't Vince Russo's idea. I think no, it's not his idea. Oh, sorry, JJ Leg. Did I miss a super? My bad. I was probably blabbering about Bret Hart. Let me cruise up here and find yours. There it is. Sorry about that, dude. Thanks for the $5. They talked about this quote on the biography. If you put the letter S in front of Hitman, you've got my exact opinion of Bret Hart. I'll never forget that. Very strange time, too. That was Mind Games. So much was happening then. That was the night before the fake Razor and Diesel came in. Bret was rumored to come back. Austin was calling him out. Bret would later form the Hart Foundation with Pillman and Owen, who are both in the ring with Austin during all this, laughing as Austin is shitting on Bret. So that was pretty interesting how drastically things would change just a little while later, just a few weeks, I think, after this promo, the put the letter S in front of Hitman promo, they would do the deal with Pillman and Austin where Pillman would break his ankle and attack him. And then the next year, Bret would turn heel, reconcile with Owen. Pillman would join the fray. And these guys were in a vicious, bitter feud with the very same guy they're standing in the ring with at Mind Games. Pretty crazy stuff. But yeah, thanks for that. Sorry I missed it. Hopefully I didn't miss any others. I don't think I did. What's up, Thomas Richmond? Adam is here too. Carmand. Didn't say hi to y'all earlier. Thank you for being here. Lex is here. So's Wolfpack. So's Roderick. Yeah, I mean, it's like you can't. It's an accident. Accidents are accidents. I mean, I've also heard when it comes to Goldberg, anyway. I've also heard Bret not blame Goldberg. There's at least one interview that exists somewhere out there that I know I've seen because I remember him saying it, where he didn't blame him. He said, there's no hard feelings. It's an accident or whatever. I think it's in the the after years when Brett thinks about it and he gets himself all riled up or bent out of shape about it or whatever. And who can blame him? He's had a little more different of a stance on Goldberg, but I can understand, Goldberg did have that reputation of just, they threw him out there, and he was, he could be a little bit reckless, just like Ahmed Johnson could. He was the same way. He was like a bull in a china shop. Goldberg, I think, was a little bit more together than Ahmed. Ahmed was just all over the place. Where Goldberg was, luckily he wasn't in the ring for very long and he wasn't doing much, but he didn't have too much regard for anybody when he picked you up and just slam you down, didn't worry about how you were landing or where you were landing or anything like that. It was Jericho called him Greenberg, and Jericho was right. He was. Yeah, Bret made that Winged Eagle title. I remember even not totally liking it the first time I saw it. I was used to that Hogan 86 belt, and then he came out on TV with the Winged Eagle. I'm like, what the fuck is that? It looks weird. But then, once Bret had it, it just looked, and Savage too. Savage helped get that belt over with me. But I think I agree. Bret looked at the best with it. It fit what he had going on, Belt looked pretty good on Diesel too. The belt looks good with black. It just does. Hart Foundation was the third best tag team ever. They were the best tag team ever. Who was the best? Conquistadors and Toxic Turtles. And then Hart Foundation number 3. That's what you got, right? Most people do. Yeah, Ted DiBiase too. House matches versus Bret during 91. They had a great Saturday Night's Main Event match too. I think it was for the Intercontinental title. I think Bret was champ. DiBiase was challenging him. Sherry was all involved in that, and it was a really good match. Bret wound up beating him, or at least maybe winning by DQ, which is kind of cool because it was almost like revenge because DiBiase had pinned Bret at the Survivor Series when Undertaker debuted. Like, they were the final two guys. Bret's brother had just passed away, and he was the last guy in the ring with DiBiase, but Bret was still not. That was that first split from Jim. That was that initial singles run where he was he was losing more matches than he was winning, it seemed like. So it was nice for me as a fan to see Bret get that payback on DiBiase. I'm having trouble remembering the finish of that Saturday Night's Main Event match, but I know Bret didn't lose the title. I want to say he just rolled up DiBiase and was able to pin him with some help from Piper or something like that. I can't remember. But it's a good match, good energy. I remember the crowd, and I remember Sherry specifically just all over the place in that match. Fun stuff. Look it up. Oh, you wonder, Keith wonders how the new belt would look on Bret Hart. I don't think it would look bad. I'm not a fan. I like this belt a lot better than the spinner belt. Nothing is worse than that. So I'm just glad they got rid of that. But I'm still not a big fan of just the big WWE in the middle. It's got to be their logo. I just wish it looked a little bit more traditional. But it does look good on some people. I think it looks great on Bobby Lashley. I think it looked great on Drew. Looks great on Roman. So the belt isn't that bad. But on Bret, it'll look okay. Wouldn't be the Winged Eagle, though. Or the IC. He looked good with the IC. I finally broke down and actually paid for a wrestling autograph. It's kind of above my head right now. It's tough to see it. But I bought an autograph picture of Bret Hart with the Intercontinental title that he signed. I don't really do autographs. I never stand in line to get autographs, and I never ask wrestlers for autographs. Really usually don't even ask them for pictures either. But I've just never been an autograph guy. But then I started thinking about it. I'm like, you know what? I need a Bret Hart autograph in here. So I just went on eBay, bought one for $80. Looks great, and it's authentic. And I needed it. So I was like, yeah, if I'm going to have one autographed piece of memorabilia in here, it's got to be from Bret. Although I got one from Sean, too. I got the Wrestlemania plaque, and I also have RVD's autograph around here somewhere, but nothing really displayed other than those guys. So it was time. It was time for Bret to enter the display. Do I think the screw job was a worked shoot? Well, the screw job was definitely a shoot. Yeah, I like that too. Daniel Bryan and Bret Hart would be an interesting match. It would be fun because Daniel Bryan would be Bret's bigger than him. So it would be kind of similar to Bret and Shawn matches, I would think, would be Bret and Daniel Bryan, although Daniel Bryan would bring a little bit more element of wrestling, mat wrestling, submission wrestling that Bret likes, but can also fly around like Shawn. I remember Bret's big critique of Shawn back when they had their Iron Man match was that he was a Mexican jumping bean, and he just bounced around the ring a lot, and nothing that he ever did really hurt you. It just pissed you off because it just threw you out of the ring. It would just head scissor you out of the ring. It doesn't really hurt. It just kind of pisses you off. So he always said what Shawn was doing wasn't really wrestling and shit like that. And Daniel Bryan can do a lot of that, but he can also wrestle. But Bret's got weight on him, though. So if you're going to be exchanging holds on the mat, Bret's going to probably dominate that. I would think, but would be fun. They would have a fun match, especially when Daniel Bryan started getting cooking with the running drop kicks and the knees and the kicks and everything to Bret. Oh, that would be good stuff. I would love it. Daniel Bryan and Dynamite Kid would have been a great match too. Did we get Bryan and Benoit? We never did, I guess, huh? Strikeforce was awesome. I watched them beat Bret and Jim Neidhart sitting on my parents' bed. A little tiny Zenith, not even a 19, probably a 13-inch TV, sitting on the top of their dresser, like a tall dresser. And I'm sitting on the bed, and I'm watching it, and it's Strikeforce, and it's on Superstars, and they beat them. They beat the Hart Foundation. I loved the Strikeforce team. They were great because it was two awesome wrestlers, Tito and Ricky Martel. Both of those guys were already champions. Tito was two-time Intercontinental Champion. He had already been a tag champion with Tony Gurria. Rick Martel held the AWA title. He was a good wrestler, and he was with Zinc in the Can-Am Connection, which I also liked. I loved the Can-Ams. And then Zinc left, and he went to WCW, and leaving Martel without a partner, and they replaced Zinc with someone who was 10 times better in Tito Santana. Oh, my God. Girls in cars. They filmed little vignettes, them driving in convertibles and their polo shirts and shit. Oh, my God. It was fabulous stuff. Strikeforce was great, but they put the belts on them right away. Immediately upon teaming them together, they beat the Harts for the title. So they didn't have much time to run because when you're champs that quick, they dropped them a few months later at WrestleMania to Demolition. Ricky had to go get surgery, and then when he came back, they split the team up. So the run was probably one of the shortest ever, but one of my favorite because the Strikeforce was awesome just because who the two guys were. They were great. Rick Martel and Tito Santana. Nothing to complain about either one of those guys. Both good wrestlers, both awesome, both have a lot of respect. Kind of wish they would have had a longer run, but then they split up the following year at WrestleMania, and Martel became the model. Yes, we know Martel is a Canadian wrestler, hence the Can-Am Connection that he was a part of. Hart Foundation versus the Rockers in Columbia, and Bret and Shawn hated each other then. They didn't hate each other in real life then. They might have hated each other at the house show then and probably fought pretty hard, but they got along. They were fine back then. It's not like they were traveling together and rooming together and shit, but they didn't hate each other. There was no animosity yet. If anything, Shawn looked up to Bret. The spinner belt is better than the winged eagle. I know you're not serious. You just fronting. It's okay, Trey. You're not blocked. Some comments are too crazy to block. I just want you to get the help that you need. That's all. Yeah, that was one of my favorite Raws because it was such a good arc. Kelvin's mentioning the street fight with Bret and Stone Cold in '97. What I liked about that is it spanned so many different segments. And Austin, that was when Bret hurt his knee. So this whole angle was just to write him off. So he came out and they kind of got into it in the ring a little bit. And then Austin was able to get a hold of his knee or hit him with a chair or whatever. Bret goes down and he just starts wearing out his leg. And he did this the previous night at In Your House at what was Revenge of the Taker. Austin and Bret had a WrestleMania rematch. It wasn't nearly as good. A lot of people forget it even happened. But it was supposed to be Sid and Bret, and then Sid went to go play softball. Austin took his place. They had an okay match, and Austin got his victory back, but he won via disqualification and then kind of hit Bret's knee with a chair. And you're like, And then the next night, they do the whole deal, and that's when, Bret's taken away in the ambulance, and Austin is behind the wheel of the ambulance. I told you we're going straight to hell, and he pulls Bret out. One of the best Raws they've ever done, especially for that time. They were they were dabbling a little bit of that. I remember Goldust and Ahmed Johnson had that crazy backstage brawl, and they had done a couple things like that. Razor and Goldust had one too, but nothing like this. I mean, this was to a whole nother level, and you had the Hart Foundation out there trying to help, and Austin just kicking their asses, and oh my God, it was so good. It was so good. And then Bret got the knee injury, and they were able to write and sew that into the storyline, which is good, because that sucked that Bret got hurt around that time when things were so hot with him and Steve and everything. So they did that angle that put him out of action for a couple months. I loved Bret as a heel. I thought Bret did well as a heel. He turned heel at the right time, because if he would have ever tried that before, I don't think he could have pulled it off. It was just the perfect time to do it. And I can understand why they did it based on the audience reaction. Back then, WWE actually gave a shit what the fans reacted to, and they didn't just do what they wanted. So if they noticed something, they would make a change, and they saw that the fans love this bad guy and are kind of growing tired of this good guy. So just like WCW did with Hogan, which was much more successful, joining the NWO and turning heel and all of that, they kind of went in a similar direction with Bret, that it's just not cool to be that anymore. The wrestling audience age is growing. More and more older fans are starting to watch that 18 to 34 demo we always talk about, and you need to supply content for that type of fan, which I was. I always brag. I'm so lucky. I like to brag and rub it in people's face, because nobody is a luckier wrestling fan than me. I was a kid during the rock and wrestling era, and I was in my 20s during the Attitude Era. I was built for this. I was the exact fan they were targeting every time. And then even when I got older and I broke that 34-year-old barrier, by then WWE's a little bit more reserved. They're going back to, not so much raunchy stuff. And now I'm an adult, so I don't really give a shit about seeing that stuff anymore. So it's just like I've always kind of been around at the perfect time periods for wrestling, where everybody else isn't. And I think that's where a lot of the anger sprouts. That's what I noticed when I first came to YouTube, is how many angry, they're still everywhere. Everybody's angry about everything. And I always laugh, because I always thought a lot of that anger was just out of frustration, because when the Attitude Era was so hot and you had girls in bikinis and, pillow fights, and you had Austin drinking beer and DX doing their crotch chops, all these angry fuckers were kids. They were tiny little shit in their diapers kids, and they were too young to appreciate it. Hell, their parents might have not even let them watch it. So then when they get old and now they become teenagers all full of P and V, and they want to be adults and they want to be all edgy and everything, now WWE's product is geared towards kids, and now they're putting everything behind John Cena. I laugh my ass off. I'm like, ha, suckers. You didn't get to experience the good stuff. So I think that's why they all got mad. Fucking PG bullshit and all this. I'm like, this is just made for kids. I'm like, you were just a kid 7 years ago, so now complaining that this shit is for kids. I'm like, it just didn't hit. You didn't land it right, So I always just got a kick out of that, because I could tell they were so angry. They were finally old enough to experience edgier adult content, and WWE's not giving it to them. Cracked me the fuck up. So anyway, I always laughed at that. Got a kick out of it. Still do. Oh, if y'all don't mind, could you smash some thumbs up buttons for me on our way out of here? I'd really appreciate that. Click it. Tap that notification bell. And if you're here for the first time, please subscribe, because we're here all the time. We're back tomorrow night. I hope you're right, Mike. You are very optimistic, and I enjoy and I appreciate optimism. But man, based on what WWE has been doing lately, it's tough. But fans are coming back. Things are looking up. SummerSlam is official for Las Vegas. Allegiant Stadium, new home of the Las Vegas Raiders. They're expecting 60 to 70,000 fans for this thing, and I'm going to try to go. Tickets go on sale on June 18th. It was all I could do to not book a hotel last night. I was looking at Vegas hotels, and I've stayed at Aria before, and I was like, I almost booked 2 nights there. I'm like, maybe I should get tickets first before I jump into that. But yeah, I'm going to be there, so we'll start talking about that in the upcoming weeks. Maybe we can plan a meetup. I'm going to try to touch base with some YouTubers, see if anybody's doing anything, that sort of deal, and maybe we can start putting some stuff together. But yeah, SummerSlam in Vegas. I'm going to be there. Let's meet up on the Strip. Have some fun. People were crying when Earthquake smashed Hogan. And then he killed Damien. Do whatever you want to Hogan. Don't hurt Damien. Not sure if I'll ever forgive Earthquake for murdering Damien. Yeah, what do you guys think? I mean, I think there's going to be a pretty big match for SummerSlam. Roman Reigns and John Cena, or Roman Reigns and Brock Lesnar are rumored. If you're having an event in a stadium that size on the same day of a big boxing fight in that same city, you got to have a big match to fill that, So that almost kind of tells me that we're almost guaranteed to get something pretty awesome. Because I'm cool with any of those scenarios, especially Brock. Like I said, I think when Brock comes back, he's got to win, kind of thing. Like, I think he's got to win first. He just got done jobbing. So, you got to come, whatever Brock does when he first gets back, he's got to win, but it might just be one match. I think eventually Roman Reigns does need to beat him and solidify himself as the head of the table, but that would be phenomenal TV. When fans come back, can you imagine Roman and Brock in the ring and Roman's trying to get Brock to acknowledge him? I hope it happens, man. So I'm going to be there live. So y'all better come to Vegas. Yeah, Slim Jim's right. I mean, PG, there's nothing wrong with PG. It's like, the TV 14 stuff, PG can be corny and cheesy and childish sometimes, but then again, so could the TV 14 shit. There's plenty of stuff during that Attitude Era time period that I was like, oh my God, it does not age well. It's ugly. It's embarrassing, just in a different way. You know what I mean? So the good thing about PG era is that one thing that we've seen during this, during this time period is that the wrestling can still be really good. We've had some great matches. There's some great talent. We've had some amazing Wrestlemanias. We've had some amazing takeovers. We've had some great, memorable matches and moments throughout the last 15 years, despite the PG rating. This is wrestling, right? We all care about wrestling, and that's the main product. And despite all of that stuff, the matches, aside from maybe a blood ban and shit like that, the matches are pretty awesome. And there's a lot of good wrestlers there that can still be entertaining despite the handcuffs of that type of content. But it's honestly kind of where they need to be. The Attitude Era was only born out of desperation. That was the only thing that was going to save them. They couldn't have, they weren't being able to compete with WCW and talent department. They had everybody over there. They had all the money. So WWE had to go in a different direction, try to outcool them. Okay, you guys have got the NWO, but that's starting to get stale. We got Austin. We got DX. We got The Rock. Didn't take long after that. And that was the end of that. Cena posted a picture of Drew on his Instagram. That's alarming. That makes me think Drew's going to win the title from Lashley and face Cena at SummerSlam. I don't want to see that. Unless you just do Drew and Cena one-on-one without a title. Maybe. Roman and Rock for SummerSlam? Holy shit, maybe. That's another match I think needs to happen. Brock and Bobby Lashley also needs to happen. But like I said, I think it's going to be really hard for me to envision. Maybe with facing Roman, I can envision it because I think that really needs to happen. And I think Lashley needs to beat Brock to solidify him as a real, as a major player as well. But you're talking about those back-to-back losses for Brock, and I just don't know. I think you bring Brock back for a win first, then you have him lose, after or down the line. That's why I'm wondering if he might win the title again. I don't know. If he does, I'm sure people are just going to be thrilled. Yeah, but anyway, we'll be talking more about current product stuff tomorrow night on the Raw review. So make sure you join us tomorrow night after WWE Raw. Like I said, we're changing things up on Monday between now and when fans come back. So tomorrow, we're going to spend just a couple of minutes on Raw, talk about the contract signing and whatever Randy Orton and Riddle do, which I'm sure will be pretty awesome. If there's anything else worth talking about, we will, but we're not going to spend a ton of time on it. We're going to cast that bullshit aside, and we're going to review a fun show from the past, which will be the debut of Monday Night Raw on TNN back in September of 2000 when Austin returned from his neck surgery. So we're going to be talking about that tomorrow. And I'm sure just like we did here, we'll talk about our favorite moments and matches, and we'll elaborate more, and we'll, just shoot the shit about the olden timey days because the current timey days fucking suck. So you guys have a great rest of your night. Thank you for being here and talking some Bret Hart with me. It was so fun to do this. It's never not fun to look back at Bret Hart's life and career. It was a blast, and I appreciate you guys hanging out with me tonight. So have a good rest of your Sunday evening, and I'll catch you here tomorrow night after Raw for the review. Y'all be cool. Peace.